That's the slide we want. How many of you are familiar with the company Answer, A-N-S-E-R? I love having this moment. Do you know that they are the single largest contractor in the entire COVID terrorism campaign? Yeah, you do now, and guess what you're responsible for now? The truth. You are responsible for this truth because it turns out that the companies on the right that you think are the ones running this show are in fact the front. Now, you know what a front organization is? They're the ones that are supposed to take the flak and take the heat. The ones on the left are the ones that actually got the money. Operation Warp Speed went to Answer. You didn't know that because you were told by the media that it went to Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, all that kind of stuff. That's not true. The prime contract of Operation Warp Speed went through Answer, a company none of you heard of. And you didn't hear about them because the contract that was signed with ATI, a company based in South Carolina, a company whose history has been government defense contracts for the purpose of propaganda. I wish I made that up. The prime contractor selected to run Operation Warp Speed was a propaganda expert for the U.S. Department of Defense. Now, cunningly, the reason why they were selected is for the following reason. And listen carefully, because this is getting really thick really fast, and I have to deliver it because I got 28 minutes and 9 seconds left, and I got a long way to go. Here's the problem. The problem is we have a world in which there's things under the 1986 Act and under the 2005 PrEP Act that actually shield manufacturers from liability. But inside of the 1986 Act and inside the 2005 PrEP Act, there's a tiny little clause problem, which is if any actions taken to declare a state of emergency are part of a willful misconduct or a criminal felony conspiracy, the liability shield gets pierced and the manufacturers of the drugs are liable for every injury and every death. Listen, they're liable for every injury and every death. So why on earth did you think that they ran Operation Warp Speed through a cover company? Think back to Bhopal, ladies and gentlemen. Anybody remember American Cyanamid, any of the great old companies, those wonderful days when we killed hundreds of thousands of people in India? Remember those? Remember those heady days of chemical corporations that would set up holding companies that actually did the asbestos deals so that when somebody actually got injured and died and got sued, they'd bankrupt the shell company. That's what Answer is. Answer is the way for the federal government never to be liable for the criminal conspiracy they know they ran. They are now one of the top 10 federal contractors in history, below Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and all those guys. Those names you know. You don't know Answer. The single company that by COVID rose the highest rank rise in the history of federal contracting, the highest single year rise ever, was Answer. And none of you know who they are. They're the target, and we're not talking about the target. We're actually aiming for the decoys and wondering why no ducks are on the table. I was hoping I could get a Second Amendment laugh out of that one. You guys are pathetic. Wake up. Let's go. I could have said moose, and I could have at least gotten the Montana people on board. Answer Corporation. They're the ones running Operation Warp Speed, and they've been set up to shield these manufacturers from ever taking the financial liability for their willful misconduct. And one day, everybody's going to go, let's go sue Pfizer, let's go sue everybody else. And the only problem is, when we go to sue them, they're going to go, hey, it wasn't us. And they're right. And all of us were asleep. And I'm talking to an awoke crowd here, and all of you were asleep. Don't tell me you're awake if you're still sleeping. Because if you didn't know who Answer is, you're still asleep. It gets worse. Fours Marsh. Anybody know Fours Marsh? Another empty, crowded room. You know who Fours Marsh is? They're the branding agency that branded COVID. They're the ones that make sure that we find hospitals that are overrun with people. And they're the ones that find kids that died of COVID right before the FDA needs to vote on giving kids injections. They're the ones that go around the world making sure that every message is always the same. We will not return to normal until we have a vaccine. Thank you, Justin Trudeau. Where'd you get the script? From Fours Marsh. And how many of you knew that? None of you. How about Palantir? Hey, that's a weird one, isn't it? Peter Thiel, who has successfully run a company that has lost $200 million plus every year for about 7 or 8 years, goes public in the middle of COVID. Isn't timing interesting? Isn't it fascinating that a company that's done nothing but lose billions of dollars goes public in the middle of the worst economic cycle we've had? Isn't that funny? And did you actually go back and read their public offering? Funny. I know you didn't, because there really wasn't one. That's why you didn't read it. Because they went public in this very bizarre backdoor way of actually selling founders' stock into the market. So we got personally enriched, using the public market as the laundering facility. Isn't that brilliant? But let's look at what they did for our COVID scandal. They actually came up with a thing called Gotham data tracking. Now, how many of you are familiar with the term Gotham? Anybody? Marvel comic, DC comic crazies out there? Hey, how many times has Gotham been associated with a really positive thing? You know, kind of Garden of Eden, you know, the wonderful Hanging Garden of Babylon, and Gotham. Gotham data tracking, you know what that does? That's making sure that every time you turn your phone on when you get off the plane, when you cross the state line, gives you a little tag that goes, hey, do you want a COVID alert in your neighborhood? You know why? Because you are being monitored. Your phone is being monitored. Your transactions are being monitored. Your credit cards are being monitored. Your health behavior is being monitored. Your vaccine status is being monitored. And it's all done under the contract run by Gotham Data Sciences, the company that went public during COVID. And none of you knew about this. And you've been to red pills. And you still haven't taken the red pill. And by the way, I'm not even to the good slide yet. So be depressed, because it's getting worse. Publicis Sapient, the Health and Human Services IT contract. Have you ever wondered how the data never seems to add up, but somebody always has allegedly the same reportable data? Publicis Sapient has the Health and Human Services IT contract to consolidate all of the data. So guess what happens? Everybody has the same number of COVID cases to report when somebody from the media calls and says, hey, how many cases do we have? Oh, 40,000. Round number, isn't it? 40,000. When in the course of human history has a round number involving the word thousand ever happened? Like there's 387, or there's 222, or there's 1,736. There's never been a 20,000 COVID day. There's never been a 20,000 cases of cancer day. There's never been a 10,000 heart day. There's never been a round number day until you actually control the Department of Health and Human Services' entire IT platform, and not one of you knows that that's a single contract run by Publicis Sapient. And you've been focused on the right-hand side this whole time, and the left-hand side is doing the dirty work. Now, why do I call them privateers? How many are familiar with the difference between a pirate and a privateer? Pirates go raping, marauding, and stealing and do all the piratey things and kind of look like me, swashbuckling, young, handsome, little less Johnny Depp-ish than I could be, but you know, I'm sexier than Johnny Depp, so he's got something to shoot for. A pirate's that. A privateer is the same thing that has permission to do it by a government that's gone corrupt. That's what these are. They're the privateers. But hey, since we have privateers, it feels only appropriate that if we have a world of privateers, we should also have a world of the next slide. The next slide. The next slide. I'm pressing the button. We also have a world of pirates. And here's our pirates.